There are fears we speak about openly, and then there are the ones we never mention, the fears we bury so deeply inside ourselves that even we forget they exist. Yet, they still guide our choices. They still shape our relationships. They still linger in the background of our daily lives like silent shadows. This is not the fear that startles you in the dark or makes you run for safety. It is the kind that whispers, the kind that hides between words left unsaid, the kind that quietly bends the course of your life without ever revealing its name. This is repressed fear, and its presence is far more powerful than most of us realize. There are fears we recognize instantly. The fear of losing someone we love, the fear of failing an important test, the fear of standing in front of a crowd with all eyes fixed on us. These fears are visible. They rise to the surface and we can point to them. We can name them. But then there are fears that never step into the light. They are not loud and they are not obvious. Instead, they sink quietly beneath our awareness, shaping the way we live without ever introducing themselves. These are repressed fears, the ones the mind tucks away so deeply that even we no longer recognize them as fears. Repressed fear doesn't announce itself with racing heartbeats or sweaty palms. It doesn't shout, "Look at me, I'm fear." Instead, it whispers. It hides in hesitation. It hides in silence. It hides in the small choices you make without ever questioning why. Think of the moment you avoid a conversation without reason, or when you find yourself hesitating to take a step forward, even though there is no visible barrier in front of you. It feels as if an invisible wall is there, a wall you cannot see, a wall you cannot explain. That wall is built from repressed fear. Psychologists have studied this for over a century. Sigmund Freud first described repression as the mind's way of protecting itself from overwhelming emotions. When something feels too heavy, too painful, or too threatening to face, the brain pushes it down. It doesn't erase it. It doesn't destroy it. It hides it. And that's the paradox. Repressed fear feels gone, but it isn't. It is still alive, only now it is hidden. Like the part of the iceberg beneath the surface of the water, unseen but massive, repressed fear exists out of sight. Yet it is what truly shapes the direction of the mind. On the outside, life looks normal. But beneath the surface, those buried fears continue to breathe. They disguise themselves as hesitation. They disguise themselves as procrastination. They disguise themselves as habits and decisions we never question. Repressed fear is not about what you see. It is about what you feel without knowing why. It is the unseen current beneath the water, quiet, powerful, and always moving you in ways you don't realize. The human mind is remarkable. It is built to protect us. When something feels overwhelming, when an experience threatens to shatter us, the mind steps in. It creates defenses. It builds walls. And one of its strongest defenses is repression. Repression is the act of burying a fear so deeply that we no longer feel it. It's not denial. It's not pretending. It's the brain's way of saying, "You are not ready to face this, so I will hide it for you." On the surface, it feels like the problem has vanished. You move on, you keep living, you believe the fear has disappeared. But in truth, nothing has been erased. The fear still exists, only now it has been locked away in the unconscious. Imagine the mind as an iceberg. The part we can see, the tip above the water, is our conscious life. Our thoughts, our feelings, our choices. But beneath the surface lies the far greater mass, our unconscious. This is where repressed fears live, unseen, unnoticed, yet constantly shaping the direction of the iceberg above. Repression is not weakness, it is strategy, it is survival. For a child growing up in a painful environment, repression may be the only way to keep moving forward. The mind hides what feels unbearable so the child can continue to function. It is, in its own way, an act of protection. But here lies the problem. What protects us in one stage of life can hold us back in another. The fear that was hidden to help you survive may later become the very fear that keeps you from growing. The adult still carries the child's repressed fear, but now it shows up in unexpected ways. It shapes relationships, it shapes ambition, it shapes self-worth. It becomes a quiet voice, steering decisions without ever being named. This is why repression is so powerful. It doesn't shout, it doesn't warn. It quietly redirects the course of a life. And so, repression is not the end of fear. It is simply fear wearing a mask, hidden, disguised, but never truly gone. Repressed fear doesn't vanish. It transforms. It slips into daily life disguised as something else. And often we don't even notice. It hides in the moments we hesitate. It hides in the words we swallow. It hides in the excuses we repeat so often that we start to believe them. You tell yourself, I'm just being careful. But sometimes caution is fear in disguise. You say, I'm just waiting for the right time. But sometimes delay is fear holding you back. You insist, that's just not for me. But sometimes rejection is easier than admitting you're afraid to try. Repressed fear doesn't make you scream or panic. It makes you pause. It makes you avoid. It makes you drift quietly away from the things that matter most. It can appear as procrastination, always putting things off, never quite ready to begin. It can appear as perfectionism, setting impossible standards so you never have to risk failure. It can appear as overthinking, an endless cycle of analysis that keeps you safely stuck in thought instead of moving forward. Sometimes it even appears in the body, a tight chest, a restless mind at night, an ache that lingers with no clear cause. The body remembers what the mind refuses to face, and repression doesn't just shape individuals, it can shape entire groups. Whole communities can build walls of silence. Cultures can create taboos, avoiding subjects too painful to confront. When this happens, fear isn't just personal, it becomes collective, and in that silence, fear grows stronger. This is the great paradox. The more we avoid fear, the more influence it gains. The more we bury it, the more control it has. Repression does not kill fear, it feeds it. And yet, from the outside, life can look completely normal. A person laughs, works, builds relationships, but beneath the surface, repressed fear is quietly steering their steps. It chooses the relationships they cling to, or the ones they run from. It shapes the dreams they pursue, or abandon. It creates a life map drawn not by conscious desire, but by hidden fear. And the tragedy is this: most of the time, we don't recognize it at all. Here is the paradox. The more we resist fear, the more powerful it becomes. The more we bury it, the more space it takes. Fear thrives in silence, and the silence we keep is what gives it strength. Repressed fear is not gone. It is simply disguised. It doesn't show up as terror in the night. It doesn't arrive with a name tag saying, I am fear. Instead, it slips into daily choices. It guides habits. It influences relationships. It shapes the paths we take, or the ones we avoid. Think about it. A person who once feared rejection may never admit that fear as an adult, but watch closely. They might avoid intimacy. They might keep people at a distance, or they might cling too tightly to love, terrified of losing it again. Another person may bury the fear of failure. On the surface, they seem ambitious. They appear hardworking. But underneath, their drive isn't joy. It isn't passion. It's defense. Every achievement becomes a shield against the failure they never allow themselves to feel. Someone else may carry the fear of abandonment. As a child, they may have learned that love can vanish without warning. So, as an adult, they hold back. They tell themselves they don't need connection. They say they prefer independence. But beneath those words is a silence, and in that silence is fear. This is why repression is dangerous. Because when fear is hidden, it doesn't disappear, it multiplies. It becomes hesitation. It becomes control. It becomes a life shaped by what we refuse to face. And here lies the paradox again. The very thing we push away ends up steering us. The very fear we deny becomes the architect of our choices. It decides who we trust. It decides when we take risks. It decides what we leave unfinished. The truth is this: what we repress does not lose its power. It gains it. And until we are willing to see it, even faintly, it continues to pull the strings. Fear does not need to be loud to dominate a life. Sometimes its quietest whispers echo the longest. Psychologists have long known that repression is one of the mind's strongest defenses. Sigmund Freud was the first to describe it, calling it the way the unconscious protects us from unbearable thoughts and emotions. When an experience feels too heavy to carry, the mind pushes it out of awareness, not destroyed, not erased, simply hidden. But modern psychology has taken this further. It shows us that repression is not only about memories, it is also about feelings, especially fear. Fear is not just pushed into the unconscious, it seeps into the way we think, the way we love, the way we act, the way we dream. It becomes the silent current beneath the surface of our lives. And neuroscience adds another layer. The brain does not forget what the conscious mind tries to bury. The amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear, still holds the memory. The body, too, remembers. Tension in the muscles, a racing heartbeat at unexpected times, sleepless nights with no clear reason. These are not accidents. They are reminders that what is hidden in the mind still lives in the body. Philosophers have also wrestled with this truth. For centuries, they warned of the dangers of an unexamined life. To live without self-reflection, they said, is to live under the control of forces you do not understand. And what greater unseen force is there than fear? Fear that is never named, fear that is never faced. When repression guides us, it is like walking with a map we cannot see. We think we are choosing freely. We believe we are in control. But in reality, the roads have already been drawn by invisible hands. The philosopher sees this as a call to awareness. The psychologist sees it as a call to healing. Both point to the same truth. Repressed fear is not weakness, it is survival. But survival is not the same as living. To live fully, to grow deeply, we must begin to notice the shadows that move quietly within us. Because the longer they remain unseen, the more power they hold. If repression hides fear, then the question becomes, how do we begin to see it? How do we bring into the light what has been buried for so long? The answer begins with awareness, not dramatic, not immediate, but gentle, deliberate awareness. And there are 3 steps that open this path: curiosity, patience, and compassion. The first step is curiosity, not the harsh curiosity of judgment, not the urgency of trying to fix yourself overnight, but a quiet curiosity about your own life. When you notice yourself avoiding something, pause, ask, what am I really afraid of here? Not the surface excuse, not the practical reason, but the deeper truth that lingers behind it. Even naming the possibility of a fear begins to loosen its hold. The second step is patience. Repressed fear does not unravel in a day. It has lived inside you for years, maybe decades. To expect it to vanish quickly is like asking a tree to uproot itself in a single moment. Instead, awareness grows slowly. Each time you hesitate, each time you escape, each time you resist, you're given another chance to notice. And in noticing, you begin to change. Patience is not waiting. It is returning again and again until the pattern becomes visible. The third step is compassion. This is the step most of us forget. Because when fear surfaces, shame often follows. You may hear yourself say, "Why am I still afraid? Why can't I be stronger by now?" But repression was never weakness. It was protection. It was the mind's way of keeping you safe when you didn't yet have the tools to face what hurt. Compassion allows you to meet that fear without blame. It creates space where fear can exist without controlling you, and in that space, healing begins. Curiosity opens the door. Patience keeps you steady. Compassion makes it safe. Together, they allow you to see what has been hidden, and once you see it, the grip of repression begins to weaken. Fear loses its greatest power when you finally turn toward it. There is something important to remember. Fear does not only hold us back, it also points us toward what matters most. Every fear hides a value. Every repression guards something precious. If you fear rejection, it means you value love. If you fear failure, it means you value growth. If you fear loss, it means you value connection. The fear itself is not random. It is a signal. It is showing you where your deepest longings live. This is why repressed fear is both a wound and an invitation. It is painful, yes, it limits us, yes, but hidden inside it is a map, one that leads to what we most desire. Think of the child who felt unheard. To survive, they learned to silence their own voice. That fear of being dismissed followed them into adulthood. They avoided speaking up. They held back their truth. But when they finally faced that fear, something extraordinary happened. They didn't just release the fear. They discovered their voice, or consider the person who repressed a fear of abandonment. For years, they avoided closeness. They convinced themselves they were safer alone, but when they finally brought that fear into the light, they didn't just free themselves from loneliness. They rediscovered the courage to love. This is the paradox. The very thing we avoid contains the treasure we seek. The fear we repress is not only a barrier, it is also a teacher. It shows us the path we need to walk. Yes, facing repressed fear can feel like death at first. It can feel like losing the ground beneath you, but in truth it is not death, it is rebirth. It is the moment when the part of you that was locked away finally returns. It is the moment when survival gives way to living. Fear is not just shadow, it is signal. It is the guardian standing at the doorway of growth, and when you dare to meet it, you discover that what looked like a prison was, in fact, a key. Fear is not the enemy, it is a messenger, and repressed fear especially carries messages we have avoided for far too long. The tragedy is that silence gives it power. The more we refuse to speak of it, the more it shapes us in the dark. But the moment we begin to acknowledge it, even quietly, even imperfectly, it starts to lose its grip. Naming fear does not make it stronger, it makes it weaker. Writing it down, whispering it aloud, or sharing it with someone you trust, these small acts bring fear out of the shadows and into the light. And in the light, fear changes. Philosophers have long said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. But there is another truth, less often spoken. The courage to face repressed fear is one of the greatest acts of self-respect. It is not about becoming fearless. It is about refusing to let hidden fear dictate the course of your life. So reflect on this. What conversations have you avoided? What opportunities have you delayed? What emotions have you numbed because they felt too heavy to face? Beneath those silences, fear may still be waiting. And yet, you are not alone in this. Everyone you know carries repressed fears, even those who appear confident, even those who seem unshakable, even those you admire most. Behind every mask is a human being quietly wrestling with shadows of their own. Realizing this changes everything. It gives you compassion for yourself and for others. It reminds you that to repress fear is not weakness, it is part of being human. But the invitation remains. Will you let fear steer you in silence? Or will you turn toward it, listen to it, and discover the value it was protecting all along? Because in the end, the fears we repress are not only barriers, They are invitations, invitations to live more fully, to love more deeply, to step into the freedom that comes only when we stop running. And when you finally face them, you may discover that what defined you was never the fear itself, but the courage it took to walk through it.